Jacob Kim has been a teacher that has taught both at the college level as well as middle school. He believes in and teaches about the free market as a way to solve most of society's problems. He's also a pastor of a Presbyterian church.
And apparently you were enamored enough with Temple that you went on to get multiple degrees and then went back as a professor. Is that correct?
Yeah, so basically the my life story has pretty much been tied to the ministry that my father began. I spent 3 years in Korea from 91 to 94, and when I came back, I enrolled in the doctoral program at Temple University.
One of the things that I found interesting when you were telling me the story about your parents originally is your mom was from either North Korea or South Korea, and your dad was from the other side. And I
Yeah.
found that interesting just because the experience that they both had to have must have been so different because of the differences between those sides of Korea.
Oh, for sure. After the end of World War II, within a year or two, there was a communist takeover of North Korea. And my mom was originally from the Pyongyang area, the old capital of North Korea. And so she literally walked south with most of her family. Her father had to stay behind, but the communists showed up one day. They said that the property belongs to the people now, so they have to leave. And so basically, she walked to South Korea with one of her sisters on her back. And I think it was about 10 years, 10 to 12 years later that she actually met my father just before he was getting on a plane to come to America to study at seminary. Yeah, so it was a
So your
kind of
father was also from South Korea. They met there.
right. Yeah, so he grew up in a really small town in a place called Namhae. And one day he just said, "Oh, I want to get an education. What's the highest degree that you could get?" He was 6 years old. He asked his older brother, who was 16, and he said, "Oh, it's a PhD." And so he said, "Okay, I'm going to get one of those one day." But then, of course, he was delayed because of World War II, then the Korean War. In fact, during World War II, because he was a Christian, he wasn't allowed to go to school. Uh,
Hmm.
Wow.
so yeah, the persecution uh, started ramping up, and so basically anyone who went to church, they were beaten, and every school day had to begin with bowing to the Shinto shrines, the Japanese deity, which he refused to do. So he was always beaten for that. And then when he finished sixth grade, and it was time to go to junior high, they just didn't let him go. So he had to wait to the end
Wow.
of the war to be able to go back to school.
So to
Wow.
clarify for what Americans would say, now we're broadcast all over the world,
Mhm.
and we all have our own beliefs, generally not the truth. The winner of every war gets to write the history books. So let's be very clear. Your father was originally from South Korea. This is the side that the Americans fought on in what we would call the Korean War.
Right.
And you were persecuted for being a Christian.
Yeah.
And they tried to force you and beat you if you didn't bow to their God because you believed in Jesus. Just
Right.
to be clear there, yes?
That's for sure.
Wow.
So,
And
I think
this is the side what we now it's cliche. We're spreading democracy. We're making the world safe for democracy. I was on Operation Uphold Democracy when I was in the army,
wow.
and that doesn't necessarily mean they believe the same things as we do. As it shouldn't. We should not be forcing our beliefs as Americans
Mhm.
down every other country's throats.
Yeah.
I just want people to understand that even when we go to another country and fight for them, it's not what the media portrays. That's kind of the whole gist of our radio show is you should question a little more, look a little deeper.
And Jacob, you were just talking about the persecution your family has had for being a Christian in Korea. And the people that live here in the US, we don't appreciate as much as we probably should the freedom of being able to worship how we see fit.
Yeah. Both of my parents, through a lot of the adversity, were able to gain entrance into the top university over there. People make comparisons with Harvard, but I don't know how good that comparison is. It's very, very difficult to get in. They both got in, And so my mom was able to get a job at the best, so-called the best all girls high school in Korea. So she was able to work there. And so she was able to support her family through that job. Then she came to America, and because her English wasn't all that great, she worked at what a lot of people would call a sweatshop. So she was making clothes all day long. But I remember when we were kids that with her paycheck, we were able to pay for all of the groceries for that week. So it was a pretty good gig, at least for her. But it was a radical change going from a prestigious high school teacher to just basically working a sewing machine 8 hours a day. Yeah, so it was a big change for her.
So she has been knocked down pretty hard twice already in her life. Once thrown out of her house, more or less, had to move to what is in essence a different country right now, as the Koreas split. And then she went from a prestigious teaching job to working in what you called a sweatshop. I'm guessing long hours, hard work, very little money. And yet you don't sound like you're resentful that America abused your foreigner mother. It sounds more like she got a chance, worked hard, and could at least buy her food. And I'm hoping she then went to grow up and do much better things from there.
Oh, for sure. So my dad was a full-time student at the time. He worked nights, went to classes during the day, that kind of deal. And so my mom, once we got old enough so that she didn't have to spend all day with us, she worked all day at, putting together clothes. So there was no resentment at all. There was just sort of like, wow, she got this job and is helping support the family. After accumulating a bit of capital, then my parents would open a store, whether it's a bodega, and there was a wig shop where she sold wigs, and so she was styling hair all day and then selling the wigs. And all of that was to help finance the church. So the church started in 1967, and they had a dream of buying a building, which they eventually did. And so to help finance that and to, contribute for I guess, getting the loan, securing the loan. So she basically started working, selling wigs, but the church was built finally in 88.
So she did whatever it took, got knocked down over and over. Your father had moved here before to get a head start. First off, let's compare that to some Americans that get irate when they run out of food stamps or their EBT card now. They believe that they are owed more. Let's look at some of the people that have come from other nations, whether depending on which side of the aisle you might say, oh, it's legal, or no, it's legal. The bottom line is, I say over and over, we have a shrinking population. We need people that provide value. You and your brain. I have talked. We sat together at a table at the Ron Paul event. Not only do we share many of the same beliefs, you are incredibly intelligent as well educated. It was a pleasure to get to know you over that week and to see your parents or hear some of the stories of what they went through. This is what America needs. Whether we're born here or born in another nation, as people that will stand up, take responsibility, and do whatever it takes to succeed. And I think if you're willing to do that, yeah, sure, the deck's stacked against you, just like everybody else. And you can fill in your own excuses and reasons. But if you won't let them hold you back, I think anybody can do anything.